Shorefront is an organization that documents the African American experience on Chicago's suburban North Shore. Includes suburbs Evanston north to Lake Forest, with specific interest in the Black communities in Evanston, Glencoe, and Lake Forest. We have a growing archives that help illustrate the historical narrative of these communities, and our center is open for public use and research projects, and residents ask questions and use this as a base for research. We try and provide as much information as possible. And a lot of times we just don't have the information, and we try and look for that information where possible. One of the things we ask for now are families to bring in a copy of part of their housing deeds that show the covenants that are put in place. We did receive one so far, which basically said if you lease this out or try and sell it to a Black family or a designated family, they can lose their title to their house. Before 1900, that sense of like a segregated community was not apparent in Evanston. So you had families from all backgrounds living throughout Evanston. I think I noted one time in 1900 that the Black population at the time was 737, and close to a third lived in the immediate downtown Evanston area. But there is a marked difference or a designation where the Evanston community or the Evanston government started redlining and creating segregated communities as early as 1910.
People weren't crying to get out of the area. When I grew up, the Black community was like an extended family. Everybody knew everybody. So housing was not a priority. The concern, of course, and what the city fathers had done is zone the Black community very high, so you could pile a lot of people in there. Not a lot of R1 and R1, but mostly R3 on up to R7 sometimes. That means it's more densely populated.
In 1921, the city of Evanston was the first city in Illinois to pass a zoning code, and that zoning code kind of went a little bit hand in hand with the redlining map. The Fifth Ward and the areas that were along the freight train line that runs just on the other side of Green Bay from where the metro tracks are, is where obviously was the lower income neighborhood, also where the African Americans can live, or mostly did live, and that was the area in our zoning code that we zoned industrial and where you could have a trash dump.
So when you have decades of redlining, decades of zoning where the area is not invested in and not encouraged to be to have investment within there. So redlining not only pushes people in a certain community, but also signals banks not to invest in that area. Banks are more likely to deny any business loan to go in that area. For development activities with the city, it becomes a harder argument because they've already zoned that in a way that is not conducive to investing in that community.
How can we effectively integrate all of our schools and eliminate de facto segregation, both Negro and white, in the schools? And this means, for us at least, a redrawing of boundary lines which actually maintains the neighborhood school concept, since our board believes in the neighborhood school concept, but at the same time provides for integrated education for all boys and girls.
What Evanston tried to do, or the school system tried to do, is try and corral as many Black residents into foster school. Sometimes you have an outlying Black family living in a block that's predominantly white, but close enough to foster school where they'll redline that one particular house out and assign that student to go to foster. Some students were out of that foster school district, and they were offered opportunities to test into their local school to make sure they are at that level. So another way of also preventing some barriers for Black students to attend certain schools.
It was in the 1967 election, and the school board said they were going to integrate. And so as a result, foster school became King Lab, a magnet school. And white parents bused their kids into the community, while a lot of Black parents been bused outward.
With the help of the computer, we redistributed the school population, eliminated that school as an attendance area, which left that school as an empty school building. Then we said we will create a laboratory school for experimental purposes in that building and allow youngsters to volunteer to enroll in that school.
I believe the Negro parents were sort of like misguided in the way that we were told that our children would automatically be first choice come the following year, which would be this September coming. And as it came down, we weren't the first to be chosen. This we got by word of mouth. It wasn't really written as such so that we could get some concrete evidence that this was so.
Well, I was perfectly satisfied with the integrating of Evanston, the school system in Evanston. And then I was satisfied with the lab school also until I found out that my child was not considered, was not really in the lab school.
When the school moved, it ended up closing Foster School, where a lot of residents thought that Foster School would just reopen as a regular neighborhood school. It was on the chopping block for closing. So the result of that had all the students that lived in the 5th Ward bust out to 5 different school zones. It also destroyed a PTA at Foster School, a very strong PTA. So that structure was diluted into 5 different schools, and black parents felt they had no voice in activities of the child at whatever school they were bused to. And that carries over to today.
Parents at King Lab found that African American students at King Lab from grades, I believe it was 4, 5, and 6, none of the African American students had made gains for the standardized test, which again for us really highlights bigger systemic issues. You know, middle to high income African American students are not achieving at the rate of our middle to high white students. But when we look at the achievement gap, I mean, this has been persistent. Several years ago, the high school really started trying to lend a hand by offering some summer learning for their incoming freshmen, because they were finding that so many students of color particularly were graduating 8th grade and not reading at an 8th grade level. Therefore, they were going to be behind even starting in high school.
We don't usually do this, but I'm going to read this resolution. It will be as fast as possible. A resolution to commit to end structural racism and achieve racial equity. Whereas the City of Evanston embraces its racial diversity and seeks to continue its path to being the most livable city in America. And whereas the City of Evanston believes that all individuals living or visiting the city should be treated fairly and with respect and dignity. And whereas the City of Evanston recognizes that there is an escalation of hatred, bigotry, and overt racism in our country.
Escalating, I think that we have to do it in Evanston. People have to see action more than just words on a piece of paper. But I really feel passionately that it's our role as city government to acknowledge these things and to vocalize how we're going to move forward, and then really move forward, including our citizens. If we really want this to be the most progressive, diverse city, we really want to, meet those marks that we have for ourselves. I think we have to get past just kind of having those words on a piece of paper and really taking some serious action. When we look at equity, I really feel like we have to invest in areas where historically we have not invested, and then the other neighborhoods that are already stable will remain stable, and the city overall will be just a better place if all the citizens feel like they're being attended to by the city government.
Section 1. The City Council of Evanston hereby acknowledges its own history of racially motivated policies and practices.